You would be surprised to know that back in 1992, AI was hot. Not ChatGPT hot, but people were talking about AI, right?
Could Arvind have built Perplexity in India?
Most likely not, right? We'll still be struggling to get the same amount of GPUs he got.
How was he as a student? Like you mentored him in IIT Madras.
By and large, he worked with me for almost 2.5 years. He had this amazing amount of energy. He'll be very quiet. He's not one of those extrovert people. I mean, even how much he talks on social media, I wouldn't guess that.
Do you like Perplexity more or ChatGPT?
Hey, thanks to Arvind's generosity, I don't have to pay for Perplexity.
According to you, what would be the correct definition of AGI?
I don't think we should use the term AGI.
Should AI researchers go into building AI startups?
Yes and no.
Good talent is going out and the brain drain is happening. So isn't it an issue for India?
So we don't really have any university that has enough funding, right, to do a scale of research like Tsinghua does or like an MIT or a Berkeley does. Right?
Do you resonate more with Subbarao, Gary Marcus, and Jan LeCun more, or tech optimistic side like XAI?
Oh man, did you realize just what you did? You put Gary Marcus and Jan LeCun in the same bucket?
No, that's my bad. China had already had DeepSeek-like model, but DeepSeek model.
They had DeepSeek, but they published about it, right? They had DeepSeek Me Too written about 1 year ago. It's not like nothing, no conspiracy theory. Right?
Yeah.
It's just that we didn't notice it until they actually did the publicity on it. Right? It's not like we three just came out of the blue.
What's the missing piece, and like why India hasn't built a DeepSeek-like model? Welcome to another episode of Tech Talks. This is your host Siddharth, and we have a very special guest with us today, Professor B. Ravindran. Hi, Professor. It's great to have you with us here. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
I hope you had a nice lunch.
Sure.
And let's be first of all, congratulations on being elected as a fellow for AAAI. What does this recognition mean to you, like personally and professionally?
Sure. So the fellowship of AAAI is like a recognition given by a society of your peers for your kind of significant contributions to both the AI research as well as to the AI community.
Yeah.
And the kind of stars who have become AAAI fellows is like amazing, and these are people who you look up to often, and to be counted among them is certainly a big honor, and it's something even doubly so because it comes from the closest set of peers to me. So that way it's been a very signal honor.
And how much hard work went into that, like over a decade of research?
So you don't work towards becoming a AAA fellow, right? It's something that happens. So it's So I've been working in AI. I mean, I started reading about AI when I was an undergrad, right? So it's like back in 1992. In the third year of my undergrad, I started reading about AI and things like that. And I've been doing AI research actively since '94. So it's been a long time, right? And so over time, we have made a lot of contributions to AI and also worked with the community, become a good part of the community as well. So all of this, it's not one single thing that you basically do.
So it's really great. I wanted to understand, back in 1992, when AI was not a very normal term, what ignited the interest in you back in those days?
You would be surprised to know that back in 1992, AI was hot.
Okay,
not ChatGPT hot, but people were talking about AI, right? So in fact, in the mid-90s, in India particularly, especially in Chennai, there was a lot of buzz about AI because of all these chess playing engines, right? Like Deep Blue, and before that there was this engine called Deep Thought. So these were actually, because Chennai has always been like the chess capital of India, right? So with Viswanathan Anand and now, Gukesh and all these guys coming from here. So back then when there was this, engine that could beat Garry Kasparov, who even Anand couldn't beat, by the way, right? So back then, so this is something that everybody said, wow, okay, AI, right? So that's certainly something that was capturing people's imagination in India even back then. Of course, in the US, in the 80s, the boom in the mid 90s in AI was actually the second time AI became hot in the US, right? So it's not the first time. In India, at least, for us, it was then when the public started thinking about AI a bit. In fact, there were, I remember, I think it was Videocon was actually selling fuzzy logic washing machines back then, right? So I mean, it's not like AI has come into public imagination now. It's just that it's significantly different this time around because you're truly seeing the impact of AI in almost everything that you're doing. Back then it was like this esoteric thing. Oh yeah, it's great. It plays chess very well, and then some marketer decides to sell washing machines with it. But you are not seeing a continued impact of AI in your daily life. But now that's not the case. You open up your phone, right? So you have at least 10 apps there that is using AI in an integrated, very integral manner, right? So I think that's the difference now. But even back then, AI was very kind of popular, right? So in fact, I've actually spoken about this in another place, but not the full history. So my first exposure to AI was when my father was traveling abroad, and he went to Singapore, and he picked up an AI book from the airport bookstore.
Yeah.
So AI was popular enough back then that they were selling books on AI in the airport bookstore, right? He picked up one, he brought it back, and then I started reading this. This is a book, Intro to Artificial Intelligence by Len Rich. It's actually a textbook. My dad didn't know that. He thought it was a popular book that I could read. It was actually a textbook on AI. So this was like 9th or 10th standard in school. That's when I started reading about my first exposure to AI goes back then. But the more formal reading started in my final years of my college.
So like fast forward to present, like how do you feel about AI today? Like how is it going to change lives in general?
AI is changing lives already, right? I mean, so you don't realize it, but you're using AI significantly, right? I mean, for example, for coming to this place, you probably use Google Maps to get here, right? And Google Maps uses a lot of AI in the back end, right? It's not like an in-your-face AI like ChatGPT, but many of the services that are there that do use AI in the back end. In fact, I'm pretty sure you're using AI to edit this podcast as well, right? To make sure the transitions are smoother and stuff like that. So AI is actually changing a lot of things, not just in the digital space, right? So even outside the digital space, the way some services are being offered, consumed, how banks make decisions on loans and stuff like that. So all of this, whether they declare it or not, some form of AI is being used, right? So that's pretty much out there. So what is different for me, especially since 2022 December, is that you are now starting to see not just products or services that use AI, but you are actually starting to see AI as a product or AI as a service. That's essentially what ChatGPT or DeepSeek or Gemini or really are, right? They're not chatbots per se. You have to construct a chatbot, you have to construct a service around this. But what they are offering you is a raw AI tool, right? And that is something I think is new. I mean, AI was never at a point where it was even, I wouldn't say these models are completely robust. There are still a lot of ways to break these models, but at least to this point where, you can, companies are feeling comfortable enough to put these out in the market or in open source and asking people to start building services on top of it, right? So I think even to this point of robustness, right, I don't think we quite had AI systems in the past. I mean, even if it was DeepSeek or even if it was AlphaGo, right, you needed to have a bunch of engineers who were actually managing it and making sure it's operating and things like that. It was very focused on a specific end goal. So I think it's a really amazing time to be in. I mean, I for one never thought that you will get to see this kind of AI so quickly, but it's not AGI, so we are not there. I know whatever AGI is, right? So we are not certainly there at a point where we can claim that true generally intelligent machines, right? Things that can basically define their own problems and learn their own problems, collect their data, and define their inference mechanisms. So those kinds of models we are still a little way off, right? So we are still in a setting where the learning process is set by the humans.
Like on that lines, I would like to understand, like according to you, what would be the correct definition of AGI, or like should India have its own definition of AGI, or we should go with the Western one only?
I don't think we should use the term AGI for actually, right? I don't think it's a well-defined term. In fact, I don't think we should have been using the term AI itself, unfortunately. But we have started. That's kind of baked in now. And if you think about what does AI mean, right? That even that is a little fuzzy, right? AI is like a catch-all term that we are now using for many different technologies, right? If you go back a few decades, rule-based systems, expert systems were AI systems, right? And then decision trees were AI systems, right? Now people are talking only about machine learning things or AI, right? But logic, first order logic, right? And resolution and inferencing or search and planning, all of these were thought of as AI, right? And they are still AI. So the AI term itself, right? Is fairly broad and has evolved over time, and now a lot of people, including some of the more regulatory bodies, are tending to define AI as something centered around learning from data. But that is not how the thing has been always looked at, right? So if you want to define what is intelligence, even that we don't know exactly how to do that. I mean, there are dictionary definitions of what is intelligence, but it always feels a little inadequate, right? So machine learning, on the other hand, because it's a more statistical process, so you can kind of define that more concretely. But artificial intelligence is still a term that is up in the air, in my opinion. And to then start talking about artificial general intelligence and then super intelligence or whatever, right? All of this is just stretching the intelligence term too broadly. Right?
So I would like to bring back the focus to India, even though in the Western countries they are using the term AGI, but in India we still haven't built a foundation model on the level of like DeepSeek, ChatGPT, GPT-4o, O3 Mini, O3. So according to you, like what's the missing piece and like why India hasn't built a DeepSeek like model?
It's not a simple answer, right? It's not a question of AI. Where has India built these models? Not just in AI, right? Where is our Formula One car? Right? So in every field of endeavor you take, right? Where are our chips, right? So main problem has been that we have lacked a large scale systematic investment into research and innovation in India, right? So that has been one of the biggest stumbling block, right? So let's just stick to AI because that's one that I know better, know best. So if you look at it, right, so we don't really have any university that has enough funding, right, to do a scale of research like Tsinghua does or like an MIT or a Berkeley does, right? So that is one part of it, and we don't have corporates. I mean, even though they make a lot of money, we don't have corporates that invest the kind of money into fundamental research, right? And they are happy to do more applied research, right? So it's not just a question of blaming academia. It's not a question of blaming the industry. I think all around, right? So we seem to have, put our bets on, things that have a more short-term turnaround in terms of, seeing the fruits of it, right? And not really invested into long-term research. So if you think about China and DeepSeek, right? And I think the Chinese premier was talking about AI 15 years ago, right? I mean, I remember seeing the first world leader to actually talk about AI with Russell and Norvig book at the background, right? I mean, so he was actually positioning himself with AI textbooks in the background, not pop sci book on AI, right? So like they started thinking about AI in very serious terms way back, right? Way before other countries kind of caught on, right? Of course, the US and Europe and Canada, there's a lot of investment going on, but the kind of focused investments that China did, right? That's allowed them to catch up, right? We keep talking about DeepSeek. What sometimes we forget, within like maybe 48 hours of DeepSeek being announced, ByteDance released an almost as good a model. Right? So it's not like they looked at DeepSeek like India is doing, right? Waking up and saying, let's build our own foundation model. They already had it there. And then within another week of it, you had Quen, right? Whatever the latest version of Quen came out. And then this basically, that this was not a one-off thing, right? DeepSeek was not a black swan as far as China was concerned. There were at least another 5-6 companies, maybe 10 companies that were at the level of DeepSeek, right? And they could just come out and in fact, I think there was some amount of strategic planning there because these guys all kept quiet until US announced the Stargate thing. And literally this was like showing up the Stargate initiative, right? But the reason they kept insisting why they were able to do this at such a cheap level is because Stargate said we need 500 billion. And these guys, right, we can do this in 4 billion or 6 billion, right? And then that was, I think, some kind of political
so like this is your conspiracy theory, like China had already had DeepSeek like model, but DeepSeek model?
They had DeepSeek like, but they published about it, right? They had DeepSeek V2 written about 1 year ago. It's not like, there's nothing, no conspiracy theory there, right?
Yeah.
It's just that we didn't notice it until they actually did the publicity on it, right? So it's not like V3 just came out of the blue. In fact, if you look at a lot of things that they used in V3, right, many of the components are there in V2. Literally, they added that RL fine tuning instead of supervised fine tuning and all that in the end, right? And then they did some supervised fine tuning after that to get you V3, right? But even the R1 was amazingly good, right? And then all these distillation stuff and distilled models and things like that were all good. I mean, I don't know if I should say this on the record. I think the American company were trying to create a moat around them by saying that you need a lot of money to get to the same levels that we do. And perhaps that's one of the reasons they didn't want to explore the cheaper alternatives. And now look at Berkeley has already done this, right? So they've actually, because they already had the GPU access and they had the talent pool, and they're able to replicate the simpler models. In fact, they have actually shown that some of the things which DeepSeek said they could not achieve, the team from Berkeley has actually achieved that, right? So for example, they said, we are not able to use RL on the smaller models, on the distilled models. So you have to do RL on the bigger model and then distill it to get good performance. If I try to do RL fine tuning on the distilled model, it sucks. Right? But the Berkeley team seems to have done it, right? And they are saying that we get good results. So instead of going back and asking, okay, these guys have done it. What is it? I mean, why didn't we do it? I think we should just stop and say, okay, now these guys have done it. Okay, now we didn't do it. So what can we take away from this, and how can we use this to bootstrap ourselves, right? And that is what the question we should ask, and there are a lot of good takeaways from this.
I wanted to know, like you are an expert in reinforcement learning, and we got open source models like Llama. Like, could India use reinforcement learning on bigger Llama models to make some these?
Yeah, DeepSeek models as well.
No, like why India couldn't thought of this, like?
Investment. See, until these guys came out with these really, there are a couple of things that DeepSeek did, right? I mean, there are some really nice thing they did. They actually went down and fiddled around with they pipelined the communication that was happening, right? This is all some low level stuff that they did, and India really doesn't have enough people doing systems research at that level, basically because we don't have access to that many GPUs to go around and say that, okay, here you take these the 20 GPUs and figure out how to do the inferencing efficiently on these, right? I mean, just didn't have that kind of thing to do it, right? So it's not just a question of AI guys doing well there, it's AI and systems and data, all these guys coming together to come up with the advancements that they had in DeepSeek. So taking the Llama substrate and trying to push that could have been harder. But having said that, there are some players in India who have actually gotten amazing mileage out of fiddling around with Llama, right? I mean, so Sarvam is one, right? So they have done some amazing work, and even AIFR Bharat has some very nicely fine-tuned Llama models. But now Sarvam has come to a point where they can actually do their own stuff, right, from scratch. They don't have to build on Llama anymore, right? So they're actually doing from scratch LLM development and deployment. And so that's certainly possible, right? It's just that we are not able to do it at the scale that China did it or the US does it, because just there are not enough VC funding and or even other sources of funding floating around for us to be able to play around with these, right?
So like you mentioned,
it always comes back to money.
So you mentioned about lack of GPUs and investment in India, and recently government announced India AI mission, where they are calling for proposals to build a foundation model from scratch. So what's your take on this? Like, will it be a success? And like, I think today news report came that around 69 proposals have come to them.
Yep.
So like, is it a great move is it a move in the right direction?
Yeah, I like your second question. Yeah, it is a move in the right direction. I'm not sure whether it's a great move or not. And India did not just announce the India AI mission, right? The India AI mission has been around in some form or the other for a while now. And even 2 budgets ago, I believe, that they announced that they are going to give like 10,500 crores for the India AI mission, and then they set up these 7 pillars for the India AI mission and so on and so forth. And this foundation model piece was just one of those 7 pillars. And more importantly, they have also gone ahead and kind of empaneled multiple cloud vendors, which has, I think, slightly better than their original plan, which was to buy a lot of GPUs, which by the time NVIDIA supplied them to India, they would have become out of date, right? But now at least we have these cloud vendors who can now hopefully provide a more subsidized thing, and then we also have a data vertical in the India AI mission. So all of these are actually good pieces to have, right? But the question is always going to be in the execution of it. I am happy that they are doing this foundation models call, but then 6 months, man. I think 6 months is too aggressive a timeline for us to really build, super capable models. What we are going to get, right, or decent models, because people have now kind of figured out how to do this. But we are not going to, shake the world, right? So I don't think the new DeepSeek is going to come out of this funding. Even though we'll get some very good models, we are going to get a lot of homegrown Indian models, which then the Indian companies, Indian startups can then start building services on top of, which they are now doing on top of, the OpenAI APIs or Llama and things like that. Right? Instead of that, we should have reasonably good models trained on Indian data, trained for Indian languages that people can build on top of. But 6 to 8 months is certainly not enough time to, unless, it would have been enough time if you had already had a very rich research ecosystem, and then these guys needed the final push to do it in the last 6 months, and they have to do something, right? But right now we don't, right? So we still are looking at people who are, tinkering with these things in the labs, in the startups and so on and so forth. So to get somebody to actually do something yet shattering or something very different in 6 months is going to be challenging. But I think it's good in one way. See, what is going to happen is we are going to hone the engineering skills of a whole generation of AI developers because of this push, right? And these guys are going to say, okay, now I can take on, maybe in the next year and a half, I can do something very different because I know how to do the standard stuff, right? And I have learned how to do it efficiently in the 6 months that I had to push myself. Now I can go ahead and do this. So if nothing else, it will give us a good set of base, foundation models that we can build applications on top of, but it will also give us a good pool of trained engineers who can then go and work with more researchers and do something better in the next year and a half. It can't be building DeepSeek. If you build DeepSeek in a year and a half, it has to be something very, very different. And I can't tell you what it is. If I can't tell you what it is, I'll be out there inventing it.
So like OpenAI started as a research lab, and like in India we have several IITs, like IIT Madras being one of them. So do you feel that government should have given more compute resources to the Indian academic institutions instead of like startups?
Has Indian government given a lot of compute resources to startups?
Like not directly given, but they are calling for proposals, and I think mostly will be startups who will be applying there. So instead of
it is not mostly startups. In fact, we have submitted a proposal. I mean, I'm allowed to say that. I mean, of course, in collaboration with the startup, right? So the idea was that whomsoever submits a proposal has to set up as a company, because 6 months delivering something requires you to have that startup mindset, right? I mean, it can't be an academic lab, can't turn around and say, I'll give you something that is, executable, that is, that's a packaged stuff in 6 months. We have our own restrictions, our own constraints that we are operating in, right? So that I'm fine with, saying that, okay, you have to work with the startups, or at least the lead partner, the person who takes charge of delivering the product, right, has to be in that kind of a setting. So that much I'm fine with. Whether India should have invested for the 6 month thing, right? 6 months, nothing happens in academia, right? One semester happens, assignments and exams happen in 6 months, right? So you can't expect, unless the research has already been happening, right? You can't say, today I'm going to give you money, in 6 months I want to see you come up with an LLM, right? No, not going to happen in academia. Government should have invested more in academia, should have had, a lot more. I mean, there's some things we have talked about multiple times, right? So, just like you cannot really do cutting edge automotive research in academia alone, right? You need to work with, auto industry to do this. Likewise, it's come to a point where you really want to do cutting edge AI research, you have to start working with industry.
And, like,
that
is
has
mo-
not been enabled in India. That's a
Okay, and like, is more compute the answer? Like, Elon Musk is betting on more compute. For Grok 3, he used around 200k GPUs. So, and the results are not that great. Like, it's better than O3, but not that great. So, like, and the compute he used is a lot more than what DeepSeek used or like OpenAI used. So, like, is more compute the answer?
more than what is the question? More than what we have, yes.
Okay.
Right? But I mean, if for the frontier models that you're already having there, is more compute the answer? Probably not. Right? I think we have to think about. I think this whole transformer based auto-regressive training, or even the reinforcement learning based fine tuning and all of these things, I think they'll soon be hitting a ceiling on what we can do with that, right? I think we really need to think about going back. Okay, how did because it's not like people who did symbolic AI, right, were slouches, right? I mean, they were in fact significantly way ahead of their time in terms of what they were thinking through in terms of intelligence, right? So I think it is good to go back and figure out, hey, how can we truly do neurosymbolic reasoning, not like just put a symbolic layer on top of what the neural network is doing, right? Is there a way to push the boundary in terms of the knowledge representation and other things that we are actually building into our AI models? I think there's some amount of work that needs to be done, even in terms of fundamental concepts that need to be imbibed into these models. I think we need to do that. So I don't think more compute is the answer, but that doesn't mean, I mean, we are at a bad state, right? Whenever I say we need more compute, it literally means coming up to a sustainable level, not talking about Elon Musk level of more compute.
Okay. We have like spoken extensively about investment, money, compute. Now I'll come to talent. So like IIT Madras creates like a huge amount of great talent like over the years, and like Arvind Srinivas is one of them, like one of notable alumni. So I like wanted to understand like like most of the IIT graduates go abroad and like settle there and like they work there. So isn't it an issue for like India? Like the good talent is going out and the brain drain is happening. So how can we retain the top talent in the nation itself?
I'm going to sound like a broken record. Invest more into the innovation ecosystem in India, right? So then you'll get these. See, there are a whole bunch of other things. Not just a question of just giving out money, right? So suppose somebody starts it, right, in India. Like this has happened, right? There are guys who have done some initial startup ideas from here. But then once they start growing, they basically find that the kind of value-added AI stuff that they are doing, right, there is no market for it in India, right? So they basically end up going abroad, right? Because that's where the market is. Even though guys started here, they built the core technology here. Now suddenly they are finding themselves out in the out in the US, because that's where the guys are there willing to pay for the kind of thing, that the margins that they need to sustain, right? They will not be able to do that in India. So so there are a lot of thought that needs to go in there. It's how do you make sure that these kinds of cutting edge stuff actually is useful in India? And I also say that many of these entrepreneurs, right, are actually coming from cities, right? And they don't know what are the Indian problems, right? They only know what are the first world problems. They really don't know what are the third world problems that we can solve. Right? They don't know what are the solutions that actually would, people would be willing to pay a premium for in India, and how to solve it in a price point that is available. So these are all a bunch of things that are there, right? And we don't have enough guidance in that space. I mean, it's not like there's an easy answer to it. I mean, some people can't come on. So there are people like Sridhar Vembu who talk about these things. By the way, Sridhar Vembu is also an IIT Madras alumnus, right? So he did make his name in India. So it's not like all IITM alumni go out to make their name. So, so
like could Arvind have built Perplexity in India?
Most likely not, right? You'd still be struggling to get the same amount of GPUs he got, right, for his first product. So
can you tell us more about your relationship with him? Like how was he as a student? Like you mentored him in IIT Madras, like his journey.
So I mean, Arvind's batch was actually amazingly good. So there were a couple of other students also, very smart kids. So I think Arvind has been, he did his machine learning course with me in his third year, and then he did reinforcement learning, and then we continued working with me. And I mean, every summer he'll go off, right? So one summer he was in USC doing an internship. Another summer he was in Montreal, Mila, working with Benjo on some summer projects and things like that. But by and large, he worked with me for almost 2.5 years, and there were several papers and other things that we worked on. And Arvind had this amazing amount of energy. He'll be very quiet. He's not one of those extroverted people. I mean, given how much he talks on social media, I wouldn't guess that. But he was not, the kind of person who goes around talking a lot. But then he was very good with working with other students and things like this. There's multiple projects which he has joined later, and then he has actually helped improve it and so on and so forth, right? So I think that was great. I mean, it's like he was very driven, right? So it's not like I had to push him along or anything. And well, so looks like he liked my teaching, so he learned more. That's basically.
Do you have any fond memories or any less known facts about him, or did you know he's going to build his own startup back then?
No, not when he was an undergrad, right? I spoke to him. I mean, it's not like I don't stay in touch with him. I stay in touch with a good fraction of my students, not just Arvind. There's a lot of other students also I stay in touch with. So we met. Arvind was actually thinking about doing a startup even before he was going to graduate. And in fact, when he did the first Twitter search bot, he actually, he showed me a demo of it. He called me one day, so we had a Google Meet. He showed me a demo of that and things like that. So we have been in touch. But I knew that he was going to go do a startup before he actually started doing this startup, because when he was having those thoughts, he had conversations with me as well. So that is fine. But when he was an undergrad here, maybe he had that vision in mind, but I didn't truly think. A lot of people change their mind, right? So I thought he would, after he went out. I mean, there are other people who I thought would become entrepreneurs who went and joined Google. But then so I'm happy he did that, and he's always been driven. So that is one thing that stood out about him.
And do you like Perplexity more or ChatGPT?
Hey, thanks to Arvind's generosity, I don't have to pay for Perplexity. So anyway, so even when I'm using Perplexity, right, I can switch to O1 at the back end, right? So it's not like I have to use his engine always, right? So I forget, what is it called?
Perplexity Pro. And
no, Perplexity is actual LLM itself.
Sonar,
yeah. So it's not that I have to use Sonar all the time, even though I do. Quite often I'm ambivalent to that, but sometimes I want to check what other things would say. I search with either Claude or O1 and things like that. That's one of the things I really love about Perplexity, right? So it's not just a wrapper around ChatGPT, it's a wrapper around LLMs. I mean, I think that I mean, a lot of services should be designed that way, because these LLMs have kind of complementary strengths. So if you're an expert user and you know what LLM is good for what applications, you should be able to choose, right? It shouldn't be that you're stuck with whatever LLM the company built a wrapper around. So I think this is great because of that, right? I think, in fact, I would even go to say that in the future this will become more standard way of designing services with LLMs. I think it's a great idea that he did, and the speed at which they're able to add these things on is great, right? So I've had more experience using this than Perplexity Pro in the last couple of months than ChatGPT. So.
Did you try deep research? Like, you are a researcher yourself, so new feature of Perplexity. Did you experiment with deep research, and how do you like it?
A lot of other things that are coming up, and including travel and things like that. So I haven't had much time to play around with it. But I've been hearing good things from my students who have been trying this out. In fact, once you become a prof and you have been a prof for several years, your students are your workforce, right? So they basically do all the research, all the reading and stuff for you. So that's basically that's what I'm hearing from them. So I think it's a good idea. But I still think it's a little bit of marketing rolled in there. Not just his deep research. I mean, everybody who are selling some deep research and other things, a little bit of marketing is rolled in there. But I think it's what is amazing to me is not just the quality of the result, the speed at which we are able to get these deep research results out, right? That's been really amazing for me. And I mean, that basically shows that a significant efficiencies have been baked into these models now. So I think that is, as a researcher, that catches my fancy more than what these models do. Right? It's just a matter of time for you to find the right prompts and the right context to make some of these spew out nonsense. So that will always, the fragility will always be there for these models, but at least you get to the nonsense faster.
Like, speaking of students as your workforce, what new is being innovated at IIT Madras, like right currently?
IIT Madras is very vast. So I can't tell you what is new being innovated in IIT Madras as a whole.
In terms of AI, Gen
No,
AI.
even in terms of AI and Gen AI, there are a lot of people working it. We have a whole department of data science and AI. We have this Vadvani School of Data Science and AI. AI for Bharat is there. God, I mean, AI for Bharat guys are doing so many new things every week, right? I can't tell you what they are working on right now. I can tell you what my group is working on. That's the limited context in which I can do this, right? So there are a couple of interesting directions we are working on. So one thing is to we run the Center for Responsible AI, right? So we have been looking at evaluations, right? We're looking at how would you, what are the different ways in which you can evaluate AI systems, right? So there are things that we are looking at in terms of, if you see, one of the things that have become very popular nowadays is asking an LLM to explain its reasons, right? Its decisions, right? Hey, okay, give me an answer to this, and then the LLM gives an answer. Now explain to me why you gave me that answer, right? And a lot of people are actually taking that as true explanation, and now we are trying to push the boundary on that, right? So what does it mean? How fragile is it? How consistent it is? And so now we are coming up with a lot more I would say a testing protocol. You're still using the basic process, right? You're going to get an LLM to give an answer and then ask it to explain the answer, but you have a whole protocol now for doing that. You don't do it once. You do it 10, 15 times, but you do it in slightly different ways so that you can measure the overall correctness, overall robustness, overall appropriateness of the answer, right? So that's one thing that we are looking at. So this is just one example of the kind of testing that we are doing on this model. It's not very exciting in terms of, okay, I'm not giving you the next DeepSeek or anything, but this is something that's making sure that, hey, all these fancy models can be used in a setting where there is, for example, regulatory oversight, right? So can I use it in healthcare? What does it take to use it in healthcare, right? Or can I use it in a financial setting, right? Things like that. So once I start thinking about the gap between having these fancy proof of concept implementations and going down to a robust deployment of the system in a real setting, right? That's a huge gap. And so a lot of the work that we do is towards covering that gap, right? And another example that we do, which not too many people are looking at, is so people talk about toxic language usage and some of these how these LLMs can be prompted to saying things that are inappropriate and so on and so forth, right? It turns out that we don't have a good data set for Indian languages. So there are a few attempts that have been made for kind of capturing Indian stereotypes, right? So what would an Indian male say about women, or what would a North Indian say about the Madrasi, or what would the South Indian say about Biharis? And I mean, those are all kinds of stereotypes are there, right? I mean, Indians are great at coming up with stereotypes, right? So all of these are there, but most of the exercise has been in English. Even though they're capturing Indian stereotypes, the stereotypes are encoded in English, like English sentences, baked into English sentences. Now, a very simple question to ask. What happens if I start translating these English databases into Hindi or Telugu or Kannada or Tamil? Do they still represent stereotypes? Or does it become a very unnatural thing to say in Tamil? What looks like a valid stereotype in English, does it become unnatural to say in Tamil? So maybe it's not, maybe it is, we don't know. Say, what are we doing now? So we are basically doing this translation, basically doing machine translation, right? So we don't want to do this at the human scale, but then get some amount of evaluation done by humans, like experts, native speakers. So now once you have that stereo data set, then you can go and take a Tamil LLM and make sure that Tamil LLM is not saying anything toxic in Tamil or anything stereotypical in Tamil. So those are the kinds of things that we are, like I said, right, the gap between having a really cool proof of concept deployment, the application, and going to a reliable deployment. There's a lot of gap, and so we have been doing research to close that.
So like India still needs more data, like which is like filtered by humans. So
we need more data, even if it is something I'll scrape off the internet, right? If you can give me English scale documents in Tamil, or English scale documents in Odia, I'll get you better LLMs in Odia. It's not like I mean, right now we are kind of making do with training something on on English, then fine tuning it on Hindi, and then fine tuning it on Odia, and then saying, okay, now we have a Odia chatbot, right? Sure, but that's not ideal.
Okay. So I was wondering, because in the West, like they have moved on to synthetic data and like they stopped using.
Yeah, we are doing synthetic data, and in fact, if you listen to Ilya, right? So he says even synthetic data is no longer the
pre-training has
thing,
hit a
right?
wall.
So he says we have hit the wall in synthetic data as well. I don't think we have hit the wall in synthetic data in India. So actually, AI for Bharat uses a lot of synthetic data for Indian languages.
Okay.
Because we really don't have real data, right? I mean. So we have to do synthetic data. We have no other go, and we are able to see significant improvement, both in AI for Bharat and Sarvam also. It's a significant improvement when they use synthetic data for training. So I think there's a lot more to be derived out of using synthetic data in the Indian language context. But we have ways to go. So we do need more human curated Indian language data. So again. AI for Bharat has put out a lot of data in the space, but we need more.
Okay. So like how can we, like, should we digitize more like written data? Like what's the way for that?
Yeah, I mean, digitizing is certainly one way forward, and I mean there are some amount of data that's available, in terms of archives which are not accessible for us to look at. For example, All India Radio thing, or the regional DD data, the Doordarshan data, and things like that. So those could be potentially made available, and a lot of government data is generated in all these regional languages, and so some of those can be suitably anonymized and digitized and made available and things like that. So we do see the other big thing with the English data, right? A lot of it was community generated.
Okay.
Right? So it was like the internet, right? The internet helped you get to a lot of data. So that is something that is missing in many Indian languages. The presence of Indian websites is very, very small, right? So even if we can digitize all the offline data that is available, or even the digital recordings that are there, if we make them available, we'll certainly be in a much better position than we are right now. But we'll certainly not match English, but we'll have to just come up with more clever ways. Maybe that plus the synthetic data will allow us to do really well in training Indian language data. But I think data is, at least reasonable amounts of data is there. We don't have to go and generate it afresh, but we just have to make it, like, curate it and make it available for AI engines to build on top of.
Okay.
And that is something which the government is promising to do. The India AI mission is promising that they will make this happen. So if that happens, it'll be really cool. Yeah.
And I wanted to get some insights on your conversation with Srinivas Narayanan from
who also is an IIT Madras alumnus, by the way.
Yeah, I know that. Like, how was the conversation? Like, any insights from there? Like, what are their plans in India? So
every word I spoke with Srinivas Narayanan was on the stage that day. So you have a full recording of that. So it's not that I had any additional insights on what he said on the stage, right? So they are, in fact, India is, I think, the largest market right now.
Second largest market.
Second largest
market for them right now.
For them right now, okay. So they are certainly keen on focusing on India, right? So obviously, Sam Altman changes tune, right? Yeah. So they are certainly looking at focusing on India, and more investments are coming. Right? Okay. I don't know what form it's going to take, and what are they going to do? Are they going to start their own India office? Yeah. For OpenAI? It's not clear to me. Yeah. But yeah, everybody is starting to look at India.
So in the talk, I saw that, like, there were several students who are willing to build AI startups, like on application layer, and they are asked for like free credits from OpenAI. So it would be great, like, if you have any knowledge, like, about, like, how is the startup culture at IIT Madras, and like how motivated students are to build application-based startups, or like deep tech startups. So like, where's the tendency more among the students?
Come on, Aether came out of IIT Madras, right? Agnikul came out of IIT Madras. I mean, it's like we have no breadth of deep tech startups coming out of IITM, and now it's a turn of AI, right? So we're going to see a lot more AI deep tech startups come out, and so that's certainly. IITM has got one of the richest innovation ecosystem in the country, right? So the research park is more than 10 years old now. The IITM research park is more than 10 years old. We have 100+ companies there. Our director has said that for this year, his target is what he calls Startup Shatam.
Okay.
Startup Shatam, which is like 100 startups in the next year, right? So that's like, so that's a kind of push that we give to students, and a lot of so the lot of VCs, right? So who are very well connected to the student startup ecosystem in IIT Madras, and IITM facilitates a lot of things. In fact, students can take a year off from their studies, whichever degree they are in. They can actually pause it for a year, go try their startup, and then they can come back later and complete their degrees, right? So then we started doing this even before the NEP said the students should be able to go away and do stuff and come back, right? In fact, so a lot of the some of the really good ideas in NEP actually came from what were you trying out?
So on that line, like Jan LeCun on his recent visit to India in a podcast with Nikhil Kamath mentioned that deep tech startups should at least have a PhD degree. So I wanted to know should AI researchers build AI startups? Like, should AI researchers go into building AI startups?
Yes and no. I mean, not all AI researchers have to go and build AI startups. Some of them are not cut out to do startups. So I think I'll suck if I go to a startup. But AI, I mean, so there are a couple of things, right? So what people fail to understand is that AI is just not using these tools, right? And then somehow getting some solution working on some data set that is handed to you, right? That might work in the short term, but there will be no true innovation there, right? And you'll be, in fact, I've been telling people, right, if you're building these kind of wrappers around ChatGPT and saying that, oh, I can get ChatGPT to do this more efficiently than the OpenAI model, and therefore I'm going to give you this as a service, you'll get subsumed in the next update to come for ChatGPT, right? So whether it is O or P or Q, I know, God knows what naming scheme they use, right? So we don't know what they will come up with next, but not ChatGPT 5, right? Anything other than GPT 5 seems to be coming up next. But the point is, the next version, not GPT, I mean, it could be Gemini or Llama or whatever, it's going to subsume those services, right? So you're going to always be treading water, thinking, okay, what is the next thing I can do, and so on. So this is not sustainable, right? So for you to do really, deep tech, as you said, really core innovation and build a company around it. So you need to have, understand how research can be done. It's not just a question of engineering a product with existing tools. You need to know, you should have the nose to build those tools yourself, right? I think you have to do that research. And whether all AI researchers should go and do startups, maybe not. I mean, you want some people to keep the fundamental research the wagon going, right? So that you can move on to the next stage, so that the next generation of researchers who come in, who want to go to the startups, will have access to new technology that you have been churning away doing your fundamental research, right? And in the US, the mobility is very good, right? So guys are doing some really hardcore deep research in academia. They move out, go and do this go to the industry for 5-6 years, and then hand off the reins to the guys who are truly interested in building the product and things like that, and come back to academia and start continuing research, right? So I think there are people like that. So I think that's what I was telling you earlier, right? In India, we don't have that kind of mobility enabled, right? So if somebody in IITM or any IIT wants to go for 5 years and do a startup and want to come back, they have to quit.
Okay.
Right. So you can go for a year and a half, and then take a sabbatical, work on a startup. But then after the year and a half or so, you have to come back, right? You have to come back to being a full-time faculty. So so those things are there. So I think the government's mindset is changing a bit. I think we'll see something better happening soon in terms of this mobility. But that has been a challenge. But going back to Jan's statement, right? I do believe that yes, to really truly build something innovative, right? So you need to have a deep tech background.
Like, I have a two-part question next. I wanted to understand, like, do you resonate more with Subba Rao, Gary Marcus, and Jan LeCun more, or the tech optimistic side, XAI?
Oh man, did you realize just what you did? You put Gary Marcus and Jan LeCun in the same bucket?
No. No, that's my bad. I know that they fight a lot with same university and NYU, but they tend to believe that LLMs are not the answer. Like on that part, they are on the same page. That LLMs won't lead us to AGI.
I think Gary is a lot more pessimistic, right? Jan and Rao are not that, right? So in fact, I would fall more in the Rao camp than anything else. I am an optimist, and so is Rao. I mean, have you ever met Rao? I mean, he's like the uber optimist, right? So he's always optimistic about everything, right? He just, I think Rao's crib is not that AI will not solve all these problems. Rao's crib is about, will the current direction of AI is or LLMs enough to solve all problems? So the question should not be AI optimist versus Rao. The question should be LLM optimist or LLM delusionist versus Rao, right? So now that I've used that phrase, you know which side of the debate I'm on, right? So I actually mentioned this in the beginning as well, right? I don't think LLMs are the current technology, even with reinforcement learning, fine tuning, and all of those things, right? And like reasoning time learning and all these things that they use, I think still there are crucial pieces missing to get some truly intelligent system, right? For what it means, right? So I think Rao has done some amazing work showing up the limitations of these models, the newer models that come up, and they still don't pass his suite of tests, right? So I think it's certainly there, right? So.
And the second was not more of a question, just a fact. Most of the authors of attention is all you need started their own startup. So I guess like AI researchers can be founders.
Yeah, I think they should be. See, the thing is, it's not that if you're good at tech, you're going to be good at doing a startup, right? So that's not. You really need the team, right? So you need a team that's going to do the tech, but you also need the team that's going to think of the market, that's going to think of customers, they're going to think of fundraising. So unless you have all of these things coming together, right, startups are going to fail, right? So that's the truth of it, right? So, and especially in India, fundraising is very hard, and and like I said earlier, finding the market fit in India is also hard. So if you're going to do a startup here, you'll probably end up going to the Silicon Valley to find the right market fit and then move there and things like that. So all these things have to come together. And the point was that the core tech team that you're going to have should be AI researchers, but it's not just AI researchers by themselves will become good founders.
On that line, can we expect a revolutionary paper like Attention is All You Need to come up from India, like next paper?
We all hope springs eternal.
In the current era, I wanted to understand like how education is going to change. Like you have been a professor for more than 2 decades, and like you have experimented with all forms and of teaching. Like you have online videos as well. So like how are like teachers going to reinvent themselves now? Like
already, the relevance of classroom teaching, right, is being challenged with all this online videos and other things that are available, right? And that is in a more resourced setting, right? So even if you're now, what is going to happen is even places like rural India, right? So where you really don't have access to this high-flying internet and all these videos, and most of those kids are probably not going to understand Andrew Ng's accent and things like that. So it's not like they can actually get on Coursera and other things, or even NPTEL, for example. In fact, people tell me that if I speak in English, which is what I do in most of my NPTEL videos, and it's hard for people who don't. For whom English is not natural, right? So for them to understand the classes, right? In fact, they would prefer if my videos are dubbed into Hindi or Telugu or whatever, right? So they are happy to listen to it there, right? And that is happening, right? With so AI for Bharat is working with NPTEL and in actually dubbing all these, not just putting the subtitles, right? Actually, the vocal dubbing and everything is going to come out in the language. So that's certainly a huge change now. Once that starts happening, right, the reach of these online material is now going to be countrywide, right? So that will certainly be the questions that we are asking now, right, will start being asked everywhere, right? But contrary to places like the IITs or some of the top schools, it's a welcome change in other places, because they really don't have access to good resources otherwise, right? So it'd be good that people can go here, and maybe high quality education will not be limited only to a few places, right? So it's going to become more democratized. I think that is a good change that is going to come. But this is more like a low bar, right? Something that is happening. For sure it will happen. There is no question about predicting what is going to happen in the future. But it's not clear to me with all these personalized teaching abilities and things like that, right? So how would, what's the role of a teacher, right? As opposed to, is the teacher's role going to be just pointing you to the right online resources, or helping you configure your AI so that your teaching co-pilot, so that you learn better from that? Or is that going to be something else? I mean, is a teacher just going to be an expert who consults on building this teaching modules, right? Or is there something still required in terms of, So I recently saw some report, right, where I think it was an UNESCO report talking about how teaching is a profession that is least likely to be represented. One of the professions, they had a bunch of things. Teaching is one of those professions least likely to be replaced by AI, because the empathy and the psychological support that a teacher gives to a student is will be very hard for an AI to replicate, right? Maybe at the kindergarten level, right? but as you get to higher standards and you get to college education and things like that, right? I mean, teachers giving empathetic support and other things are actually not as prevalent as we would like to think, right? Because class sizes are getting so large. Right. So when I started teaching reinforcement learning, I used to have 6 students in my class, right? Now I have 180. Right? And there are popular courses, right? First year programming courses, right? Have 250 students, 300 students in the class. You don't know the names of most of the students, right? So that kind of a connect and other things are certainly not there, right? So we start going to higher and higher education. It's not clear how this is going to shape up, right? And what we have to teach. For example, do we still teach them programming? Do we teach them syntax? I don't know, right? I'm a huge fan of not wanting to teach syntax anymore, right? But tell them what is the right way to structure your program. What are the kinds of safeguards you should ask your co-pilot to put into the code, right? How would you construct a test cases, right, for your code, so that you are covering all the test suits, right? How will you put in your error checking components and things like that? More about the higher level design and matching your code design to your user requirements and things like that, as opposed to teaching them syntax, right? And that could be one thing, right? But the code is something a lot more structured, easy to understand, and you can do that. But in other topics, it becomes even more challenging. So what is it that you are giving this students, right? In fact, so when I teach reinforcement learning, since I have been working with the folks who actually built the foundations of reinforcement learning, right, I can still give them interesting stories and anecdotes about how this algorithm came to be, right? That actually makes them connect to this thing better than just reading the algorithm dryly from the book. But it just takes one semester of recording my lectures to create an AI that will be able to give the same anecdotes. That's why I was telling you, right? Does my role become that of advising in AI? So hey, this is the AI that will give you history of reinforcement learning also, because it was trained with XYZ. Is that a better use of my time? Maybe. I don't know. I'm seriously confused. No, I mean, actually, I've been talking to my students. There's a very, very, transformational stage, right? In multiple things. I've been asking my students, because my reinforcement learning lecture, there are at least 2 versions of it, right? So one that I taught for NPTEL, there's one that I taught for our online BS program. Both are available online, right? So people can look at whichever version they want. One is slightly more updated, one has board work, other has slides, whatever fancies you can use that and look at it and all that, right? I'm teaching fundamentals of reinforcement learning. It's not like they changed overnight, right? So what is the value that I'm adding in class? In fact, I have this class of 180 students. I opened a portal, I opened a Discord channel for them, told them, hey, give me ideas on what I can do differently so that you guys can watch the videos and get something more out of the classroom. I say, no, come to the class, talk to us. We would like to interact with you. That's the value of coming to classes for us, right? So basically, I'm still teaching the same material. I talk a lot to the students, but
do you use reinforcement learning to teach students as well?
Everybody uses reinforcement learning to teach. Everybody uses reinforcement learning to teach anything, not just reinforcement learning. Yeah. So RL is a fundamental learning mechanism, right, for animals and things like that. Of course, not everything is RL, and RL is certainly more than just a cherry.
In a very tricky position you are in. Right now.
I mean, all teachers are in this kind of a tricky position, I think. Okay. In fact, if we don't take attendance and make attendance mandatory, right, a good fraction of the students won't show up in class. But they're all happy to watch these videos, and then if they have any questions, they get on, Discord or whatever, Moodle or whatever channel you have for asking questions, or they form their own WhatsApp groups and then they discuss the things in that, and they're very happy to do it that way, right? As opposed to coming to classroom. And I mean, you can see the attendance will dwindle from first year. They are still having the school mindset, so they show up, and then later on, it just slowly starts vanishing. So all of this happens. So we have to really think. I mean, we are doing a whole bunch of these thinking through, and let's see. But teaching is going to look very different 5 years from now.
So this is for the students.
Education, not just teaching. Education is going to look very different 5 years from now.
So this was mostly about the students who are currently enrolled in IIT. So like how is the process is going to change for the students who aspire to win IIT? Like how is going to the process of like writing entrance exams in the era of AI is going to change for them? So Microsoft recently published a report in which it says that using too much of AI tools is going to affect your critical thinking. So what should be new tactic for the aspiring IITians in the era of ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok? How is the preparation tactic is going to change for them?
See, I mean, whenever technology gets introduced, right? I mean, we forget certain skills. So, for example, with the ubiquitous calculators, right? A lot of people cannot do mental arithmetic, right? Does that make them dumb?
I don't know.
Exactly, right? So the same thing with Microsoft is saying, oh, these people can't do it. Hey, does it make them really dumber? As long as you give them access to the ChatGPT tool that they were using, they can still answer those reasoning questions, right? You train them to use a tool and then you take it away and then say, now you have to solve the problem. That's not a fair test of their abilities, right? So I don't buy the argument that these actually make people dumber. It just trains them to solve problems in a different way, right? You probably are going to solve much larger problems using a calculator than you would have if you had used just mental arithmetic, unless you are Shakuntala Devi or one of those prodigies, right? So I think it's not. So in fact, that is one nice thing about all these tools, right? So whereas you needed to be a child, like a math prodigy to solve some of the problems that Shakuntala Devi could have solved without access to computers or calculators, now you have democratized high-level math computations by bringing these in, right? Likewise, you're democratizing perhaps critical thinking by bringing in some of these AI models. I mean, I suspend disbelief when I say AI models do critical thinking, but so I don't. I mean, certainly there are a lot of gaps there. But let's for a minute agree, right? So AI, whatever the AI models are good at doing, maybe you're democratizing that, right? So in some sense, maybe those skills might not be the ones that are needed for you to get on in your life. So things might have to change, right? So
so can we expect
in the short term? I don't think we'll react fast enough to either change JEE or the GRE or whatever, right? Whatever of these competitive exams. I don't think it's going to change very quickly in the next few years or something, but certainly, there would be changes, right? There will be changes. And just like now people are talking about this kind of hybrid chess, right? Instead of just human versus human. So Gary Kasparov is a huge fan of this. He says you can get a lot more interesting gameplay if you allow a human computer team to play against a human computer team, as opposed to just humans playing against humans. Whereas, in the recent championships, it was decided by the human blunders, not necessarily by very, very brilliant tactical moves, right? So maybe that might not happen if you have a human computer computer team playing against a human computer team, so you'll probably get a lot more interesting games happening, right? So that's that's something which Kasparov actually pushes for.
Okay.
Maybe you have to start thinking about, okay, now I'm going to create exams which you should take with the help of
AI.
AI.
So you were mentioning about your TAs, about changing the process of creating assignments. Can you tell us more about that?
No, I mean, it's something that we are debating now. So suppose I give people written assignments, right? So we even tried it. I took some of my old assignment questions and then just fed it as it is, just a text into Perplexity, and then it actually gave the answer, right? I mean, it gave a reasonably good answer. And I'm pretty sure students can download the answer, change the text, and change the font or whatever, and then submit it as if they did it themselves. And then there is also this question about one of my colleagues did this. I mean, he actually gave a little bit more tricky questions and asked them to give the prompt that they use for getting the answer. So to see if they actually understand what is the process by which the answer should be derived. But in our case, we just gave the question, right? I mean, just like no prompt, nothing. Just gave the question, whatever, including just the final question, whatever it was, right? No, not even rewording it to make it sound like a more modern prompt. It still gives an answer, right? Now, should we think about obfuscating this, or should we think about asking different questions? Should we not ask questions at all? These are all things, I mean, basically don't do assignments at all. These are all things that we were thinking about. Then we have come up with something which is not completely satisfactory to me, but it's the best that we could do in the short run, right? It's basically, when we have a tutorial section, right? So it's 1 hour a week, they do a tutorial, which normally was basically to get them to understand how to code RL. So they will do 6 of these tutorials, and the rest of the weeks they were free. Now what we are doing is, the rest of the weeks we're asking them to come in and asking them to do the assignment question sitting in the class, turning off the Wi-Fi.
Okay. That's
right.
Yeah.
Just do those. I mean, the questions are not super hard or anything, right? They just test if you understood some of the basic concepts, right? So, in fact, some of the assignment questions I used to ask in exams. It's like, so you can sit in the exam and actually write those things. So something along those lines. So that's what we are trying now. It's a pain still, and we can't ask elaborate questions. It has to be something that is answerable in half an hour or something in a classroom setting. And we do allow them to refer to notes and stuff like that while they answer the questions. So it's kind of the boundary line between writing an exam and doing the assignment is becoming thinner in this model. But that's the best we could. I mean, giving assignments to take home and do doesn't make sense anymore.
So, like, what are we training students for? Like, how should they buckle up for the work they are going to enter in the next 5 years? Like, it's going to be completely changed. So, are we ready for that? So, like,
the curriculum certainly is not.
Okay.
Right. And so what I've been saying, regardless of what field of work they are going to go into, they are going to be able to do it better with the right judicious use of AI tools. So one of the things that we should train students in is not just in the fundamentals of the subject, right? But also in how they should be able to use AI to improve their efficiency and improve their capacity and so on and so forth. But at the same time, what they shouldn't be using AI for as well. So that's something that they should be trained in when they get out, right? And of course, it requires a significant overhaul of the curriculum for all the subjects and so on and so forth. Right now, the government is just saying, oh, teach everybody one module on AI, and that should be enough. But that's not enough, right? We have to think very deeply about, for example, I was telling you in software engineering, because coding is something that I understand better, right? So I was telling you that we really have to talk about the structure of the code, how will you translate user requirements into program modules and things like that, but not really worry about the modules itself, right?
Okay.
So maybe in CAD CAM that's an equivalent to that, right? So maybe you don't have to worry about how you would actually use the what are but you need to understand design principles, right? If the AI spits out something and that says it's okay, this is aerodynamically very stable, then you should know, at least you have to ask what set of tests would you run on this. And then once it spits out the test results, you should have enough, skills to understand that these test results are actually meaningful and they actually mean that this design works. Right? Maybe that's the kind of maybe that's the kind of understanding of the subject that you need, rather than knowing how to actually use the tools to draw things and do the design and so on and so forth. I think that is a significant rethink that needs to be done in every subject, every field. But then you still have to learn the fundamentals. It's not like you can get away from teaching the fundamental subject, because I don't think we are at a point where we can completely rely on the outputs of these AI systems, right? So you need to have enough training background to know and to verify, and what is the protocol for verifying what the solutions that this AI model spit out. So that training still has to happen, right? And of course, if at some point this whole singularity business comes through, then maybe you just put our head up and relax. But not anytime soon.
So previously you mentioned like use AI as you use computer. Can you tell us, our viewers, like what do you mean by that?
So if you think about how ubiquitous computers have become, right? Can you do anything now without access to a computer?
No.
I mean, everything that you use has some kind of a computer, even if it is like going now, if I go to a McDonald's or something like that, and now they're asking me to press on some keypad, like some touch screen, and then order food there, right? Instead of going and talking to a human being, right? That's a computer. In fact, to that extent, right? Even things that are non-technical, right? We are starting to use computers. So that's how ubiquitous it is. And likewise, if you're a journalist or anything, I mean, you need word processing. I mean, Excel and Word and whatever the equivalent of those, right? You would be using them all the time, right? So like that, AI is going to become something that you would use for doing almost everything, right? So in fact, at some point of time, you might want to order food, and then you basically, you go stand there, it will scan your face and say, oh, you're here, Siddharth, okay. Last time you had this, this dosa with this chutney and things like that. Do you want to order an extra side of chutney with your dosa today or something? It should be able to tell you that, right? So.
And how is going to change the work culture? Like, will we have like 4-day work or like 3-day work?
The French have 4-day work. I said the French have 4-day weeks. You don't need AI to change that. It's a more of a culture thing, right? So I don't know. I mean, those things will evolve, right? I don't think there's going to be a direct impact on how many days you go to work or things like that. It will be how much more you get done in the 5-day work that you do. Right? And that's certainly going to be. This is something I forget. What is the name of the law? This thing people were quoting, right? Satya Nadella, somebody was quoting, right? If you're able to do something more efficiently, then more work will be created.
Jevons
law, yeah.
Jevons.
Oh, yeah. What's that thing? Jevons. I don't remember the bit. So that's what's going to happen, right? Yeah. See, for example, folks are talking about how they can write apps, right? In like 3 hours, 6 hours, right? I mean, or even half an hour, right? Depending on how skillful you are at using these tools, right? You can write apps in half an hour, right? Now I can create apps for doing all kinds of stuff, right? So maybe there was no need to have that many app writers earlier, because app development would take a few months a cycle, and nobody wanted to wait for that long. But now if I can just go to a website and say, okay, hey, this is what I want, and then the guy at the back end sitting there reading it and say, okay, here you go. Half an hour later, here's your app. Download this and run it, right? Now I might have like another zillion app developers sitting out there and doing this, right? So these kinds of things could happen. So it's not just a question of whether I'm going to do 3 days work instead of 5 days or 6 days work. It's going to be more like, how much can I do in the 6 days? How much more can I do in the 6 days? That's my sense of what will happen. And of course, I mean, there might be some people who choose to say that, no, I still want to do the same amount of work, so I'll get done in 3 days, have fun the other 4 days. But that might be a personal choice as opposed to the industry work culture moving to a shorter work week.
Like, if not professor, what alternate career path would you have chosen?
Professor.
Yeah,
I mean, I've been wanting to be a teacher from when I was like 4 years old or something. I come from a family of teachers, and so like say, my grandfather was so popular as a teacher. He had a fan club. There were students who used to dress like him, comb their hair like him, and try to walk like him and things like that. So and he he always used to wear a white shirt and a brown pant to college, right? I mean, it's like this uniform. He had this thing, and so there's guys who they started wearing white shirts and brown pants and things like that. So like that's the kind of teachers we have seen in the family, and so I've always been.
And like, what is the one thing you like most about the IIT campus?
Well, the campus, the greenery, obviously, right? Of course, there are also a lot of friendly animals and things like that, but the greenery, the oxygen, the cleanliness. Of course, you get dust on campus because it is a forest campus, right? But you don't get pollution on campus. So it's not cleaned in that sense of being pristine, clean like some of the Western countries, but it's clean that there's no pollution on campus. It's beautiful. One of the biggest perks of working for IIT is living in this campus.
So, like, usually I would have asked for only one advice for youngsters, but you are professor, I would like to ask for 3 advices, like one who has graduated, one who is in high school, and one who is in college.
See, one of the things I will tell to students who are aspiring, right, is that it's not always a question of what discipline you study, right? What subject, what's the degree that you get in, right? There are people who get degrees in something, and then as the community evolves, as the research fields evolve and things like that, they move around, they do very, very different jobs, they learn things on the fly and so on and so forth. So what you should be looking for, right, when you enter into college and then you study, right, so you should be looking for, don't get disheartened because you did not get into the branch that you wanted to get in, or you did not get into the college that you want to get in, and so on and so forth. You should look at building your overall, learn how to make friends, learn how to learn, right? So it's not a question of what you are taught, right? But you should be able to go out and learn on your own. And the college time is the time that you get to do all of this, right? So you get to learn. So that is what you should be getting out of the college, not just the technical subject that's being taught to you, right? It's more it's your pathway to becoming an adult, right? So that's maybe kind of somewhere there in between. I segued from talking to school kids to talking to current college students, but you get the drift of what I'm saying, right? So the goal that you should get out of college is that as you are closer to becoming an adult by the time you get out of the college, and that is what you should be, right? It's not just a question of mugging subjects and learning that. So that will always happen. Many people learn on the job and so on and so forth. So that's be one thing that I tell people, right? Be flexible, be ready to move around, be ready to change. But what you should be learning is how to learn and make friends. The friends that you make in college and friends that you make in school last forever. I'm still in touch with my schoolmates. In fact, we meet almost like every month, right? And of course, I'm in touch with my college mates and things like that. So these are things that really you should be taking away from these, not just the subjects that you learn, right? That gives you an additional value for actually going to school, right? You might still be learning your subjects from your online portals, but you're going there to make more relationships and things like that. And the third piece, you wanted me to talk to people who have graduated, right?
Yeah.
So when you get out of college, right? In fact, there's a couple of things which my advisor, my PhD advisor told me, right? So he used to say the things that you do here in college, or in this case, my PhD, is just the beginning of your learning. It's not the end of it. Right? This is not the final problem you're going to solve in your life. You're going to go out of college from here and you're going to start your career, right? You're starting your research career. So that's because once you graduate from college, right, it is not like you have to settle right away, right? Even after you graduate, right? No, explore a few more things. I mean, of course, when you're in college, you can explore a lot, right? I mean, nothing is expected of you. So you have to be a little bit more responsible once you're graduating, but don't settle right away, right? Because when you're still like 23, 24, you still have this, freedom to move around a little bit. I mean, modulo your family circumstances, right? That's always there. Be wary of how much you need to give back to your family, because your family obviously has brought you to that point, right? Without their support, I mean, I know, I see so many students, right? Unless there has been significant support from the family, the guys wouldn't have been in college, right? So that's a different thing. So if you finished college, then the family certainly did something for you. If that they had to make a sacrifice, you have to give it back to them, right? Now, that's a good point. But then, otherwise, right, if you have the freedom, explore a little bit before settling down. So that's one piece of advice.
Thank you so much for your time. It was very nice having a chat with you.
Thank you.